The bustle of New York City had always energized Cameron. He loved the crowded sidewalks, the roar of traffic, the constant hum of life. After living in Manhattan for 2 years, he still found the subway an exciting puzzle of lines and schedules, a vast network that threaded beneath the city's busy streets. But that sense of excitement curdled into dread on the night he stepped onto a train that never stopped. Cameron worked as a junior editor at a small publishing house, often staying past regular hours to finish projects. On this particular evening, the clock crept toward midnight by the time he left his office. With deadlines looming, he craved nothing more than to collapse in bed, get a few hours of sleep, and face the cycle again in the morning. Rushing into the subway station at 42nd Street, he found the platform unusually empty. The city's usual press of bodies had dwindled, leaving behind only a handful of stragglers. An older man in a threadbare jacket sat slumped on a bench, eyes closed. A woman leaned against a column, tapping on her phone. Cameron cast a weary glance at the overhead digital sign. The next train to Brooklyn was due in 1 minute. He exhaled in relief, stepping up to the edge of the platform. The lights in the tunnel flickered, and a rumble carried through the stagnant air. The train's headlights shone like dull eyes as it approached, squealing to a halt. The doors hissed open. Cameron boarded along with a few others. Inside, the car was mostly empty, drab fluorescent lighting giving everyone a washed-out look. He found a seat at the far end, letting his head rest against the window. The seat was cold, the kind you'd expect to warm from 1,000 daily commutes, but tonight it felt as if no one had occupied it for a long while. With a soft lurch, the train pulled away from 42nd Street. The station's lights receded into the tunnel. Cameron closed his eyes, exhaustion weighing on him like a heavy blanket. Soon he drifted off in a half-doze, lulled by the steady clack of wheels on rails. When he blinked awake, the digital display above the doors read, "Next stop, 14th Street. Normal enough, he thought. He yawned, checked the time on his phone. 12:24 a.m. The train should be at 14th soon, but as the minutes ticked by, the train didn't slow. A fleeting worry nudged him. Maybe there was track maintenance, or the train was skipping certain stations. But it kept barreling forward with no sign of braking. The hum of the lights overhead buzzed in his ears. He glanced at the map posted above the doors, expecting to see the standard route of Lower Manhattan stops. Instead, he saw station names he didn't recognize. Eclipse Street, Last Breath, Terminus. A frown creased Cameron's forehead. This had to be some sort of prank. He leaned in, searching for familiar labels: Atlantic Avenue, Borough Hall, J Street. But they were gone, replaced by cryptic names he'd never seen on any MTA line. Odd design shapes accompanied them, like stylized silhouettes or symbols that made no sense. "You shouldn't have gotten on." Cameron jumped at the voice. It came from the seat across the aisle, where a woman in a dark coat sat. He hadn't noticed her before, and her eyes were locked on him. Her voice was flat, an almost emotionless monotone. "Excuse me," he asked, heart starting to pound. The woman said nothing further, turning away to stare at the floor. Cameron noticed her face seemed off. It was like looking at a photograph taken out of focus, her features blurred around the edges, making it hard to read her expression. He rubbed his eyes, blaming fatigue. There must be a route diversion, he muttered to himself, determined to remain calm. He stood and moved to the doors at the end of the car. Peering through the glass, he saw only blackness rushing past. No tunnel lights, no station platforms. Just endless dark. Unease rooted itself in Cameron's gut. A quick glance around revealed 4 other people in the car. All of them sat stiffly, hands in their laps, gazes distant. Their clothes looked oddly dated, as though they'd stepped out of different eras. One wore a wide-brimmed hat reminiscent of the 1970s. Another had a coat that might have been fashionable decades ago. Each passenger's posture seemed unnaturally rigid. Cameron swallowed. "Hello?" he ventured, stepping closer to the nearest passenger, a man wearing a frayed business suit. "Could you tell me where this train is going?" The man remained motionless, eyes fixed on the seat in front of him. Cameron felt a pulse of panic. "Sir?" Slowly, the man turned his head. Cameron's stomach flipped. The man's face was blurred, like the woman's, features out of focus. Even the color of his skin was dulled, as if drained. Cameron strained to see if it was some optical illusion or a trick of the lighting. In a flat, echo-like voice, the man murmured, "You shouldn't have gotten on." Then he resumed staring forward. Cameron backed away, heart pounding in his ears. He looked to the next car through the windowed door. More passengers, similarly stiff, similarly blurred. What is this? He twisted the handle to open the door and move between cars, but it wouldn't budge. Locked tight. Striding to a window, Cameron pressed his face to the glass. In a typical subway tunnel, you might see the flicker of passing lights, the tiled walls of upcoming stations, or an occasional service walkway. But outside was only a yawning void, an empty blackness that seemed to swallow the world. He felt the coldness of the glass as if it were the only tangible reality. We must have passed 14th Street by now, he thought, and 23rd, 28th. Where are we? He pulled out his phone, but there was no signal. The battery icon flickered, then the screen went dark. Dead. Yet he'd charged it an hour ago. Cursing under his breath, Cameron shoved the useless device into his pocket. The train maintained its steady roar, never slowing, never pausing. The overhead display blinked once, then changed. Now it read, "Next stop, Eclipse Street." A jolt of fear shot through him. That was one of the strange names on the map. Was this train truly heading there? A hollow voice drifted from behind him. "We never stop." Cameron spun around. This time it was a teenage girl who spoke, wearing a faded hoodie, her hair matted against her forehead. Her eyes were blank, and though her face wasn't as blurred, it lacked detail in an unsettling way. "We never stop," she repeated, almost mechanically. He swallowed, edging back. "Look, I don't know what's happening, but this can't be real." She blinked slowly, then turned her gaze to the floor, saying nothing else. Trying to quell the rising panic, Cameron decided to move through the train car by car until he found an exit or a conductor. Usually the operator's cabin was in the first car, or there might be an emergency door he could open. He approached the door that led to the adjacent car. Again, it was locked. He tried the opposite end. Also locked. The sign above read, "Do not enter." Desperate, he tugged harder, but it wouldn't yield. When he spun around, a narrow metal door labeled "Emergency Exit" caught his eye. The latch was sealed. He fumbled with it, ignoring the glances of the eerie passengers. After several frantic tugs, it cracked open an inch, letting in a rush of cold, stale air. His adrenaline soared. If he could get onto the tracks, maybe he could find a walkway or something to lead him out. Anything to escape this nightmare train. He pressed all his weight against the door, but it refused to open further. Some hidden mechanism jammed it in place. With each yank, a dull clang echoed in the sealed corridor beyond. Finally, he gave up, panting in frustration, the door back in its locked position. A crackle came over the train's speakers, making Cameron jump. The overhead lights flickered. A distorted voice, like an old radio broadcast laced with static, intoned, "Next station, Eclipse Street. Next station, Eclipse Street. Next station, Eclipse." The recording looped, skipping in a broken glitch. Then it cut out abruptly, leaving the train in tense silence. Cameron stared at the overhead display, which still promised Eclipse Street was coming. But the train soared on, never slowing, the windows showing nothing but black. He rubbed his eyes, trying to think logically. Could he be asleep, having a vivid nightmare? Every detail felt too tangible. He felt the vibration beneath his feet, smelled the faint odor of stale air and metal. He pinched his arm, hard, wincing at the pain. Awake then. He was definitely awake. Somewhere near the center of the car, he saw an emergency intercom, the type you might press to call the conductor. He sprinted to it, jabbing the button repeatedly. A faint beep told him it was active, so he spoke in a rush. "Hello? Anyone there? We have a problem. This train isn't stopping. We're trapped. Please respond." Silence crackled. Then a faint hum emerged, like distant breathing. "You shouldn't have gotten on," whispered a distorted voice. This time it sounded more malevolent, like multiple voices layered together. Cameron tore his finger from the button in horror. He backed away as the overhead lights dimmed, flickering with a sickly yellow hue. The other passengers remained still, as though these glitches were normal. A trickle of sweat slid down Cameron's temple. Time seemed impossible to measure. Cameron approached the blur-faced woman who had first spoken to him, mustering calmness. "Why are we on this train? Where is it going?" he asked quietly. She blinked, her blurred features shifting in a nauseating way. Her voice emerged dull and distant. "It goes to the end, then it comes back again, but some never leave." He shuddered, drawing closer. "I don't want to be here. How can I get off?" Her eyes a smear of grey met his. "You can't," she said. "Not once you board. We shouldn't have gotten on." Cameron's frustration flared. "What do you mean? There must be a way out. An emergency door or the conductor's cabin?" She shook her head slowly. Her hair, pinned behind her ear, seemed too stiff, like it was glued in place. "We are all travelers who boarded by mistake." A wave of despair crushed him. Was he doomed to ride forever with these motionless figures? That made no sense. He refused to accept it. He turned to the teen girl who sat hugging her knees. Do you remember how you got on this train?" She lifted her gaze. "I was running away from home," she whispered. "Got on the subway, it was late. Doors shut, never opened again. That was. I can't remember how long ago." Tears slid down her cheeks, but her face remained unnaturally blank, like a mask with water pouring down. "I can't leave now. I'm stuck. We all are." Cameron's throat constricted. No, there has to be a way. Suddenly, an odd detail caught his eye. The overhead route map had changed. It now listed the following stations in eerie, flickering text: Eclipse Street, Candlelight Alley, Last Breath, Terminus. After Terminus, there were no further stops. The line ended. His gut clenched at the final name. Terminus, the last station. A sense of finality or something more sinister. Another glitch from the PA system squealed overhead. "Approaching Candlelight Alley. Doors will remain closed. Next stop, Last Breath." Cameron staggered backward, pressing against the cold metal of the seat. The train wasn't physically stopping, yet the announcements suggested they were passing these bizarre stations. The other passengers barely showed no reaction. In normal subway cars, there's an emergency brake cord or lever for dire situations. Cameron spied a small red handle labeled Emergency Brake Penalty for Misuse. If anything warranted pulling it, this did. He lunged forward and gripped the handle, yanking it down. A groan reverberated through the cabin, metal scraping on metal. The train shuddered, lights flickering rapidly. For a moment he thought it might slow. Then an angry hiss ripped through the air. The handle snapped back up, slicing Cameron's palm. He gasped in pain, stumbling to the floor. The train resumed its relentless pace, ignoring the brake. A small smear of blood stained the handle. Breathing heavily, Cameron cradled his injured hand. The cut stung, adrenaline surging. He looked around frantically, searching for cloth or tissues to press against the wound. One of the stiff passengers extended a pack of tissues, face expressionless. Cameron took them, choking out a quick thanks, though the passenger's features remained a blur. As he dabbed at the blood, a wave of dizziness overcame him. Brief images flashed in his mind. A memory of getting on the subway at 42nd Street, tired but determined to get home. Another memory of stepping into a dimly lit car that smelled faintly of ozone. He recalled a sense of wrongness that he'd brushed aside. The sign said, "Brooklyn bound." Or did it? He shook the reverie away. Something told him that his own memory was unraveling, that if he stayed on this train much longer, he'd become like these others, blurred, timeless, half lost in the hum of the rails. At intervals, the darkness outside flickered, as though faint shapes appeared in the black. Once, he swore he saw a row of ghostly buildings gliding past, windows lit by candle-like flames. Another time, it looked like a platform with silhouettes of people waiting. But the train never slowed, never opened its doors. During one fleeting moment, he pressed his face to the glass and saw a sign flash by. Candlelight Alley, scrawled in some archaic style, illuminated by flickering lanterns. Then it vanished into the void. He realized the train must be passing these bizarre stations but skipping them, or perhaps it was passing beyond reality's usual boundaries, sliding into places that existed only in nightmares. All at once, the overhead system crackled with new vigor, a deeper voice replacing the static-laced female announcements. The voice vibrated with a heavy resonance that made Cameron's skin crawl. "Attention! We will soon arrive at last breath. Stand clear of the doors, though they will not open. Remain seated." A chorus of mechanical clicks echoed through the car, as if every seatbelt that didn't exist was snapping into place. The passengers around Cameron still did not move. He felt a looming presence behind those words, as if the train itself possessed a dark intelligence. He tried calling out, "Why are you doing this? Where are you taking us?" But the PA offered no response. The woman in the dark coat spoke again, voice as hollow as before. "Some trains never belong to the city. Some lines lead away from everything. We got on by mistake. But there must be a way off," Cameron insisted, fighting tears. "Could we not break a window?" The woman's blurred mouth twitched. "Try." Desperation flared. He picked up a metal rod from under a seat, some piece of broken machinery, and swung it at the window. It clanged off the glass, leaving not even a scratch. He tried again with all his strength. Nothing. The glass was unnaturally strong. Or the train was not truly glass at all. A new wave of dizziness struck. The overhead display changed to "Next stop, last breath," text glitching in and out. Cameron braced himself. If this last breath station materialized outside, maybe there'd be a walkway or a platform he could leap onto if the doors so much as cracked open. The train thundered ahead. Through the window, Cameron glimpsed a row of tall archways, each exhaling a pale mist that rolled across a platform. A sign glowed faintly. "Last breath," the letters shifting as if alive. Figures in black cloaks stood on the platform, unmoving. He couldn't see their faces. His heart soared for a beat. Maybe someone could help. But the train barreled past without slowing. The figures never turned. The station vanished into the darkness. The display overhead flickered, reading now, "Next stop, terminus." A hollow pit formed in Cameron's stomach. The final station. If they reached terminus, what then? The cryptic comments from the passengers implied something final, inescapable. Could it mean death? Gathering his courage, Cameron marched to the front of the car, determined to reach the conductor's cabin if he had to tear the door off its hinges. The sliding door to the next car was locked, but he hammered on it, shouting, "Open up! I know someone's up there, let me in!" A voice hissed from the other side. "The train doesn't stop. We can't stop." He slammed his fists again. "I don't care. You have to let me off. I'm not part of this." Hot tears of frustration burned at the corners of his eyes. The voice behind the door whispered, "You shouldn't have gotten on." Rage and dread mingled in Cameron's mind. He realized that no one in charge would help him, that he was alone in this. The train rattled, heading toward whatever horror awaited at terminus. Unless he did something drastic, the overhead lights dimmed further, casting the car in near darkness. The blurred passengers seemed to recede into shadow, as if merging with the seats. Faint luminescence leaked from the emergency signage, the only glow illuminating the gloom. Cameron thought of the emergency door he'd tried before. It opened a crack. Maybe if he forced it or used a tool, he could get out onto the track. The idea terrified him, but staying on board terrified him more. He rummaged through the car, searching for anything that could pry the door. A metal handle from under a seat, a fire extinguisher behind a panel. He found one near the driver's end of the car. Perfect. He hefted it, ignoring the vacant stares of the passengers. "Are you with me?" he asked the teen girl, voice shaking. She didn't respond, just stared at her shoes. He scanned the others. No one showed willingness to help. They've given up, he realized. I won't. Returning to the emergency door, he jammed the nozzle of the fire extinguisher into the gap, leveraging it like a crowbar. The door creaked, letting in frigid air that smelled faintly of rust and decay. Gritting his teeth, Cameron pushed with all his might. The metal bent, squealing in protest. Behind him, a passenger murmured, "You can't escape. You shouldn't have." Cameron ignored them. He felt the door give another inch. Outside, there was no real tunnel, just a swirling darkness that might be open space or something else entirely. But he saw a narrow ledge or walkway, maybe. If he could wedge the door wide enough to slip out, he might jump for it. The train lurched violently, almost knocking him off balance. A new voice boomed over the speakers, deeper and more resonant than before, like thunder in a canyon. "Terminus approaching. All must remain on board." Cameron's heart pounded. He shoved again, and at last the door screeched open just enough for him to fit. A gale of cold air rushed in, stinging his face. He glimpsed a blur of shapes, outside, impossibly contorting in the darkness. Was there a ledge? Desperation overrode terror. He pushed his body through the gap, shoulders scraping metal. The train's velocity slammed wind against him, nearly tearing him loose. He clung to the doorframe, peering outside. Flickers of undefined shapes whirled, and beneath them a narrow edge of concrete or steel flickered in and out of view. If the train was truly in some twisted dimension, there might be no stable ground to land on. Still, he had no choice. Gathering every ounce of courage, Cameron hurled himself out the door, bracing for impact. The darkness swallowed him. For a split second he felt weightless, as though he'd jumped into a bottomless pit. The roar of the train receded behind him. Then he slammed onto a surface, hard, pain jolting through his shoulder. Gasping, he rolled onto his back, the wind knocked out of him. Above, the train's lights streaked by. He caught a final glimpse of that glowing carriage, silhouettes of blurred faces pressed against the windows. Then it roared onward into the black, leaving him behind. For long seconds, Cameron lay there, body aching. He tested his limbs. Nothing seemed broken. Aching, but functional. With shaking arms, he propped himself up. The space around him was pitch dark, save for a faint luminescence from the path the train had taken. The rails, if that's what they were, glowed faintly in the distance. He stood on a narrow ledge or platform that extended into darkness. Panic tugged at him. How could he find a way back to the real tunnels of New York City? He took a cautious step, the ground seeming solid. One foot in front of the other, he inched forward, arms outstretched. A heavy silence pressed around him, broken only by his own labored breathing. In the distance, something else glowed, a rectangular outline. An old, rusted door, perhaps. He approached it, every hair on his neck standing on end. The door had no handle, but a faint sign read, "Service Access." With trembling hands, he pushed. The door creaked open to reveal a dimly lit tunnel. Harsh fluorescent tubes flickered overhead. A battered sign on the wall read, "Maintenance Corridor 7 in standard MTA style." Relief surged through Cameron. This looked like a real subway area, albeit rarely used. He stumbled through the corridor, footsteps echoing. The heavy door slammed shut behind him, vanishing into the wall as if it never existed. Heart hammering, Cameron pressed on until he found a flight of concrete stairs leading upward. At the top, an old metal gate stood partially ajar. Beyond it was a familiar subway platform, albeit deserted. A cracked tile mosaic spelled out 34th Street, Penn Station. Dust coated the benches, but it looked convincingly real. A stale but recognizable New York air filled his lungs. He hurried out, searching for an exit. The station was emptier than he'd ever seen it. Lights dimmed, no personnel in sight. Eventually, he found a set of turnstiles that clicked him through without needing a Metro card. Ascending further, he emerged onto the street. Nighttime Manhattan sprawled around him, headlights zipping by, neon signs flickering. The city's normal hum blanketed everything. A clock on a nearby building read 3:42 a.m. The ordeal had lasted less than an hour, if the time was correct. But for Cameron, it felt like a lifetime. In the weeks that followed, Cameron struggled with nightmares. He avoided the subway entirely, opting for cabs or rideshares no matter the cost. The thought of stepping onto another train made his pulse spike. He questioned his own sanity. Could the entire episode have been a stress-induced hallucination? But certain details haunted him. The bruise on his shoulder from jumping out of the train, the tear in his shirt from the door's sharp edge. Each time he touched the scar on his hand where the emergency brake handle had cut him, he remembered the shrieking metal and the blurred faces. He tried telling a close friend about it, but the friend just stared, half convinced Cameron was having a breakdown. "You probably fell asleep, missed your stop, ended up at the last station," they said. "The rest is just your imagination." Cameron couldn't blame them for doubting. It sounded insane even to him. Yet sometimes late at night he thought about those strange station names. Eclipse Street, Candlelight Alley, Last Breath, Terminus. Were they real places somewhere deep beneath the city, or in some dimension adjacent to it? One evening, Cameron found himself walking near the same station where it all began, 42nd Street. As he passed the entrance, a chill prickled his skin. He saw an older man in a threadbare jacket, the same figure from that first night, leaning against the wall. Their eyes met, and the man's lips curled into a grim half-smile. He mouthed silently, "You shouldn't have gotten on." Cameron froze in shock, but the man shuffled away into the crowd, disappearing. A surge of panic nearly made him vomit. Was the man real, or had he emerged from that nightmare realm? Gathering his composure, Cameron fled. He had no intention of following that man or ever stepping onto a train again. The city's labyrinth of tracks might hold countless mysteries, but he wanted no part in them. As far as he was concerned, the train that never stopped could keep rolling into darkness. He had escaped once. He wouldn't tempt fate a second time.